The Weight of Compassion. Chapter 1. Dusk Beneath Shadows. Dusk draped over the divided square like a worn blanket, its shadows stretching long and dark between the crumbling stone buildings. Vendors shouted their wares, the scent of roasted chestnuts mingling with the earthy aroma of stewed lentils from a nearby stall. Fynra Zelthar stood at the edge of the square, hands tucked deep into the pockets of her patched wool coat, the fraying edges a testament to her modest means. Around her, the clamour of the market faded into a low hum, punctuated by the sharp cries of children. A small boy, dirt-streaked and gaunt, struggled to tear apart a crusty piece of bread, his fingers trembling with hunger. The oppressive presence of faction enforcers loomed over them like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows. Fynra's stomach growled, the remnants of her meagre meal, a few turnips and a dollop of sour yogurt, seemed inadequate compared to the boy's desperate struggle. She glanced around, noting the enforcers' watchful eyes, their heavy cloaks billowing as they moved through the crowd like spectres. A vendor nearby offered fried dough to a group of laughing children with grease-smeared faces, but Fynra could barely muster a smile. The rations in her pocket felt like an anchor to her own survival, yet the boy's pleading gaze held her captive, a silent plea for mercy in a world where it was scarce. The boy's fingers finally tore the bread, revealing a meagre filling of wilted greens and a few scattered berries. He looked around, eyes darting, as if fearing the act of eating would draw the ire of the enforcers. Fynra hesitated, pulse quickening. Would sharing her food, her only food, bring about her own downfall? The Council of Shadows had strict taboos against aiding the helpless, and the thought twisted her stomach. Yet the boy's hunger gnawed at her resolve. She knelt beside him, lowering her voice, as she discreetly slipped a small piece of her ration into his outstretched hand. He gasped, eyes brightening, and she caught a glimpse of gratitude lighting up his weary face. "You're brave, sister," the boy murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he quickly stuffed the food into his mouth, chewing with the fervor of someone who hadn't eaten in days. Fynra smiled, warmth spreading through her, even as the fear of being caught lurked at the edges of her mind. I hope the flame watches over us," she whispered, a prayer to Valara, as she rose, glancing fearfully at the enforcers. A spark of defiance ignited within her, a reminder of the vanished people, those who had once dared to stand for the voiceless, even in danger. As the boy finished the last of the bread, his eyes shining with the divided square sprawled beneath a midday sun, a vast cobblestone expanse shadowed by the towering mountain spire above. Fractured stone benches lined the perimeter, their surfaces worn smooth by countless protests, while merchants' distant cries echoed against the oppressive silence. Fynra Zelthar brushed her cloak, the weight of rations pressing against her side, a burden she felt unprepared to bear. She had turned her back on the chaos, yet the boy's gaze haunted her thoughts, a persistent echo that tugged at her conscience. Bright sunlight illuminated the drawn faces around her, etched tight with hunger and fear, while a child sat alone nearby, clutching a crust of bread that barely resembled a meal. The world around her blurred as urgency eclipsed a deeper need within her. A small spark of compassion ignited within her. Would it lead her to safety or ruin? Fynra crept forward, each step a silent rebellion against the chaos surrounding her. The boy was small, too thin, his skin a canvas of dirt and desperation. She noted how he hesitated, glancing around as if the shadows themselves might pounce. A surge of anxiety coursed through her at the thought of offering help. The rations in her pocket weighed her down like heavy stones. She crouched low, breath hitching as she reached into the depths of her cloak, fingers brushing against the tightly wrapped bundle. The boy's eyes darted to her, wide and wary, a mixture of hope and fear twisting in her gut. Would he run? Would he scream? Fynra's fingers trembled as she unveiled the small portion of bread, a meagre offering in a world rife with plenty and scarcity. The boy's gaze flickered from the bread to her face, searching for a sign that she meant no harm. She forced a smile, though it felt foreign, a mask to hide the uncertainty roiling within. "It's just bread," she whispered, her voice barely escaping her lips. The boy's resolve cracked, a flicker of trust breaking through layers of wariness. He inched closer, hunger in his eyes sharper than any blade. She extended a hand, trembling slightly, feeling the weight of every gaze in the square upon her. What if Thrax's followers appeared? What if this act of kindness sealed her fate?
The square pulsed with life, the murmurs of the crowd, a distant roar as Fynra's world narrowed to just the boy and the bread. She watched as his fingers hesitated, then lunged for the offering as if it were a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Relief washed over her, a fleeting warmth against the icy grip of dread. As he tore into the bread, crumbs spiraled like fallen leaves, and for a moment the chaos around them faded. But reality crashed back. She remained a target in the open. The factions could strike at any moment. Would this boy's fleeting moment of joy cost her everything? Fynra gasped as she watched the boy devour the bread.
The divided square buzzed with tension, a vast expanse of cracked cobblestones surrounded by crumbling buildings that loomed over the crowd like silent witnesses. Fynra ducked into a shadowed corner, adrenaline surging through her as her throat tightened, struggling to breathe. The midday sun bathed the scene in harsh light, illuminating anxious faces that mirrored her own desperation. She clenched the rations in her pocket, guilt gnawing at her insides. Had she sparked hope or merely drawn unwanted attention? Whispers crackled in the air, an electric tension building, and the danger felt closer than ever, ready to engulf her. Fynra pressed her back against the cool stone wall, her breath shallow. She risked a glance into the chaos of the square, where merchants haggled and children dashed about, blissfully unaware of the weight pressing on her. Her fingers brushed the coarse fabric of the rations, both a lifeline and a burden. A part of her wanted to shout to expose the injustice surrounding her, but fear held her back. The enforcers lurked nearby, their cold gazes a reminder of the authority that suffocated dissent. She had shared food, a small act of defiance, but what if it marked her as a target? What if the boy had seen her? A shout cut through the air, a command that sent chills racing down her spine. Fynra froze, her heart pounding. Enforcers, clad in dark insignias, moved like shadows through the throng, scanning for weakness. She swallowed hard, the weight of her choices tightening around her. Would she hide, cower like a cornered animal, or stand firm against oppression? It was easy to proclaim bravery in the safety of her thoughts, but out here danger lurked with every move. Her fingers twitched, yearning to reach for the rations, to recall the child's hopeful face, the flicker of change she had ignited. Ducking deeper into the alley, the scent of damp earth and sweat filled her nostrils. The enforcers' footsteps echoed, relentless in their approach. Yet a spark of resolve ignited within her. The boy's face flashed before her again, hope shining bright in his eyes, a beacon in the darkness. If she turned away now, what would it mean? A coward? A bystander? The decision pressed heavily on her chest. She could either stay hidden, protecting herself, or step forward, risking everything for those oppressed. The weight of her actions anchored her, yet urged her to leap into the unknown. The cacophony of the square faded as she focused on the approaching enforcers, pulse racing in her ears. No more hiding. Fynra straightened, determination surging through her veins. The choice was. Dusk draped the divided square in an ominous glow, shadows stretching like warning fingers across the cobblestones. Fynra Zelthar stepped into the throng. Her pulse raced as she fixed her gaze on Cynar Thrax, whose imposing stature loomed in the distance, flanked by his supporters. The air crackled with tension. She had mere days left to confront him and demand answers about the faction split. Failure would lead to innocent suffering. Permanent consequences felt crushing just beyond the horizon of the weak. Pushing through the crowd, each shove forward was a battle against the tide of bodies, determination fueling her resolve. Every second counted. The crowd swelled around her, a sea of faces twisted with anger and hope. Fynra caught sight of Cynar, his authoritative presence reminiscent of a king on a throne. She hesitated, the pressure increasing as she faced so many watchful eyes. Silence fell over the crowd, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. 3 days until the deadline loomed, and failure wrapped around her like a tightening noose. With a deep breath, she surged forward, pushing through the bodies, her voice a whisper of urgency against the rising din. "Cynar," she called, desperation lacing her tone. "We need to talk." Cynar turned, his eyes narrowing as he caught her gaze. The energy shifted, and she sensed the weight of their confrontation. His supporters shifted uneasily, glancing between him and her. An intruder in their midst. "What do you want, Zelthar?"
Cynar's voice was smooth, but his expression hardened. She swallowed, the words poised on her lips. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, a deafening blast shattered the air, sending shockwaves through the square. Screams erupted as the crowd surged, a chaotic wave of bodies pushing Fynra backward. Panic seized her as smoke billowed from the far side of the square, thick and acrid, obscuring the once clear sky. The crowd was a frenzy now, people fleeing, fear etched across their faces. Fynra fought against the tide, mind racing. She had to reach Cynar, to make him understand before it was too late. The explosion had shifted their dynamic. They were no longer two adversaries in a debate, but players in a game of survival. The stakes had never felt higher. Fynra's resolve hardened as she caught Cynar's eye across the tumult, his expression unreadable amidst the chaos. Somewhere behind them, a child's wail pierced the air, a stark reminder of what was at stake. She had to act, to make Cynar see reason before the week ended, and the innocent fell victim to their indecision. As she turned to shove through the panicking crowd once more, a figure emerged from the smoke, cloaked in darkness, and Fynra's heart sank.
Amidst the crumbling ruins of the divided square, smoke curled like ghostly fingers through the air, choking the sunlight into a dim haze. Fynra pushed through the throng, anxiety clawing at her as she navigated the sea of frantic faces. Each expression mirrored the chaos around her, intensifying her sense of urgency. A child's wail echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the stakes involved. Cynar's heavy words loomed large in her mind. The enforcers were coming, a palpable threat just beyond the chaos. Every instinct urged her to flee, yet the cries of the vulnerable anchored her in place. No retreat, not now. A surge of bodies rushed past, faces twisted in fear, but Fynra remained still, anchored by the chaos. A man stumbled, dropping a bundle of goods. An apple rolled to her feet. She bent down, fingers brushing against the cool skin, the juxtaposition of the mundane against the chaos striking her. Each second stretched, the weight of the moment pressing on her mind. The apple, innocent and caught in the wake of destruction, seemed to hold a weight of its own. She grasped it, her pulse a frantic drumbeat. Could she really turn her back on those who needed her? The crowd's frenzy escalated, a chorus of shouts and cries that made her heart pound. Fynra scanned the crowd, searching for the child amid the chaos. She spotted a small figure, crouched and trembling, eyes wide with terror. Guilt surged within her, a stark reminder of her promise to help, but the enforcers loomed closer, their presence a tangible threat. Footsteps thundered nearby. She could almost feel their breath on her neck. Should she stand and fight, or flee and live with regret? In that moment clarity sliced through the chaos. She gripped the apple tighter, knuckles white. Others were fleeing, abandoning their post, but she could not. Not now. The decision solidified within her. She would not allow fear to dictate her actions. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, the apple a small yet defiant gesture against the chaos. Each step felt like a rebellion against the tide of panic, against her own trembling resolve. She would protect those who could not protect themselves, even if it meant facing the wrath of the enforcers. As she moved toward the child, the chaos around her faded into the background, leaving only her purpose. The enforcers may come, and consequences awaited, but Fynra's path was clear now. She dropped to one knee, offering the apple, a gesture of resolve. Would it be enough? The question lingered, unspoken, as she locked eyes with the child. In that moment Fynra understood. This was more than a choice. It was her very essence laid bare, a promise forged in the heart of disaster. As she knelt before the child, Fynra... Chapter 2. The Crucible of Choice. The divided square lay before Fynra, a vast canvas of cobblestones slick with morning dew, each stone glistening in the muted light. Overhead heavy clouds loomed, their dark shadows casting an oppressive pall over the square, thickening the air with an uneasy tension. The scent of damp earth mingled with the sharp tang of metal, a reminder of the violence that had recently erupted. Murmurs of the crowd swirled around her, whispering like rustling leaves, punctuated by distant chants that reverberated in her chest. Her pulse raced, a wild drumbeat echoing in her ears as the rough texture of the cobblestones dug into her soles, grounding her in a moment urgent and fraught with peril. Fynra pushed forward, the crowd's restless energy thrumming in her veins. Her gaze darted to the rickety stage at the center, its wooden frame creaking under the weight of its history. Flashes of movement caught her eye as Cynar Thrax's faction surged forward like a dark wave, their faces twisted in anger.
The acrid smell of smoke lingered, remnants of burnt banners swirling through the air, mingling with the rising tension that crackled like static. The thud of boots on stone reverberated through the chaos, a menacing drumroll underscoring the urgency around her. As she neared the child, her throat tightened, a bitter taste of dread mingling with the sharp air. Cynar's voice cut through the noise, low and dangerous, a snake's hiss that sent a shiver down her spine. "Do you truly think you have the audacity to attempt such a foolish rescue?" he sneered, stepping into her path, a wall of muscle and menace. The flickering torches cast long shadows, distorting his features into something monstrous, and her fists clenched, heat rising in her chest. Fynra's heart thundered as she sidestepped Cynar, adrenaline igniting her limbs. The cobblestones felt uneven beneath her frantic steps, every jolt a reminder of the stakes. She reached out, fingertips brushing against a rough stone wall, the graffiti's jagged edges a testament to the pain etched into this place. Tension crackled in the air, sharp and electric against her senses. Could you possibly step aside?" she shouted, her jaw set and shoulders squared, though doubt gnawed at the edges of her resolve. But as she pushed through the chaos, a scream shattered the air, piercing her heart like a dagger. She skidded to a halt, gasping as the aftermath unfolded before her. The child lay motionless, a fragile figure crumpled against the cobblestones, surrounded by a sea of frenzied faces, their anger morphing into something darker. The morning light struggled to break through the clouds, casting a dim glow over the scene, and the air thickened with a silence that pressed down on the divided square, wrapping it in despair. The atmosphere shifted palpably, the crowd's anger coalescing into a single heartbeat of fury. Fynra.
The divided square stretched before Fynra like a yawning chasm, its cobblestones cold and unyielding beneath her feet. Heavy morning clouds loomed overhead, casting a shadow that felt like a shroud, suffocating the flickering light of dawn. A faint metallic tang hung in the air, anger and fear swirling together, mingling with the acrid scent of charred wood from recent fires. The distant murmur of a restless crowd thrummed in her chest, a tension that pulsed through the cool morning air. Fractured stone benches lined the perimeter, their surfaces worn smooth by countless protests, while graffiti marred the crumbling walls, desperate cries for justice etched in faded colors. As she inhaled, the chill in the air stung her lungs, a reminder of the battle that lay ahead. Fynra squared her shoulders, the uneven texture of the cobblestones echoing her countless stands against the tide of injustice. The torches flickered, casting shadows that danced across the square as Cynar stepped forward, a dark cloud amidst the gathering storm. "What do you want, Zelthar?" he sneered, his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. The crowd shifted, their breath a collective whisper of anticipation, eyes boring into her, seeking courage in her defiance. Doubt twisted in her gut, but she pushed it down, the bitter taste of fear clinging to her tongue. "What you did to the child, it's wrong. He deserves justice, doesn't he?" she stammered, forcing the words out against Cynar's menacing laughter. The air thickened, an electric charge sparking between them as his followers began to close in, their faces twisted with contempt. The rhythmic thumping of feet on stone echoed the turmoil within her, urging her to flee from the hostility that pressed in from all sides. Cynar stepped closer, the scent of smoke and sweat mingling with the metallic tang in the air. Fynra's breath caught in her throat as doubt flickered in the eyes of the crowd. They hungered for justice but feared the price it might demand. Shadows warped the faces of the followers encircling her, their presence a palpable threat. A shiver coursed through her as her gaze fell on the rickety stage at the center, barely standing yet overshadowed by the weight of countless cries for justice. It felt like an altar, and she was the sacrificial lamb, destined to fall before Cynar's faction. In a rush of clarity, Fynra bolted from the suffocating grip of the divided square. The cobblestones became a battlefield beneath her feet, each step a reminder of her defeat. The whispers of the crowd faded into a distant roar, uncertainty echoing through the air as she left behind the flickering torches and the looming shadows of Cynar's faction. The divided square crackled with unrest, the midday sun glaring down on a volatile confrontation between factions. The air thickened with the acrid smell of smoke and shouts, echoing off crumbling stone walls scrawled with graffiti that chronicled the people's struggles. A small rickety stage stood at the center, barely holding together, yet serving as a focal point for cries of justice. Flickering torches cast long shadows, creating a dance of light and dark,
that mirrored the brewing conflict. Fynra Zelthar raced into the fray. Her heart raced, a drumbeat of urgency. "I must help the child," she whispered, her voice barely breaking through the chaos. 3 days remained before the end of the week, and if she didn't act decisively, the consequences for the innocent would be permanent. Guilt tightened her chest as she scanned the square, knowing every second counted. Each moment lost could mean life or death. The clash escalated as fists flew and cries pierced the air, drowning out Fynra's determination. Her gaze locked onto a small figure crumpled on the ground, a child caught in the chaos, blood staining the cobblestones beneath the child's torn shirt. "No, no, no!" Panic flooded her mind, guilt tightening her chest. She hesitated, fearing the two factions surging like a tide would notice her. Indecision hung over her, heavy as lead. The dread enveloped her, suffocating her resolve. Each lost moment felt like a betrayal to that child, the urgency clawing at her, each tick of the clock echoing her indecision. Fynra's breath came in shallow gasps, her thoughts racing. The wails of the child sliced through the clamor, sharper than any blade. "What if I'm caught? What if they turn on me?" But as she watched the child's eyes flutter, a fire ignited within her. The choice loomed: step forward and risk everything, or remain a silent witness to suffering. She clutched her chest, her heart thudding defiantly against fear. If she didn't act soon, the innocent would suffer. The knowledge bore down on her, suffocating her. Just as she began to inch forward, a loud crack echoed through the square. Gunfire. The crowd shifted violently, a wave of bodies crashing toward her. Fynra stumbled, nearly losing her footing. There was no more time for doubt. She had to move, had to reach that child before it was too late. With every ounce of courage she could muster, she darted through the chaos, dodging limbs and shouts, all the while hearing the relentless ticking of the clock in her mind. As she reached the child, Fynra knelt, her hands trembling as she assessed the injury, desperate to stop the bleeding. But the moment she touched the child,
the divided square pulsed with chaos under the midday sun, a glaring spotlight on desperation. Fynra Zelthar stood at the edge of the throng, her heart pounding as she spotted a small, vulnerable child caught in the crossfire of shouting factions. Days slipped away, her opportunity to commit a desperate act to save the innocent dwindling with each passing moment. "I have to help him. I only have 3 hours until it's too late," she whispered, dread clenching her gut as bullets whizzed past her head. Time was slipping away. Failure to intervene now could have permanent consequences, and the innocent would suffer. Every instinct urged her to flee, but she was rooted to the spot, torn between fear and the urge to act. Fynra hesitated, a surge of panic coursing through her as the skirmish unfolded. Nearby, a fistfight erupted, fists flying and shouts echoing against the stone walls. The child's cries pierced the turmoil, tugging at her heart. Each second dragged on like an eternity. She took a step forward, her pulse thundering, but the sight of a man brandishing a weapon lodged a lump in her throat. "No, don't go," Cynar Thrax's voice sliced through the chaos, his wide eyes filled with urgency. "I must implore you, reconsider this course of action. To venture forth is to invite peril unto yourself." The child stumbled, a flash of red staining the ground as a stray blow struck too close. Dread tightened her throat. She could turn away, but the child's whimpers gripped her conscience. Panic surged as she darted forward, desperate to reach him. Cynar gripped her arm, his expression a mix of fear and resolve. "Stop, if you go out there, you're signing your death warrant." His words echoed painfully, yet the child's cries haunted her, a reminder of past failures. She pulled away from Cynar, resolve hardening. How could she abandon the innocent? Before she could reconsider, Fynra surged into the fray, chaos enveloping her. She lunged toward the child, now crumpled on the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The faction's eyes bore down on her, tension thickening with every step. She crossed a line, one she couldn't uncross. The moment her fingers brushed the child's shoulder, a deafening roar filled the air, chaos erupting around her. In that instant, the stakes shifted. Her desperate act risked igniting a full-scale conflict. She had saved the child, but at what cost? Time's urgency pressed against her as every heartbeat intensified the gravity of her decision. What had she unleashed? Fynra's breath hitched as she cradled the child, the weight of her actions settling like a stone in her stomach. The factions surged around them, anger and fear igniting the air. She had stepped into the storm, her choice echoing with consequences she couldn't yet fathom. With the child in her arms, she felt the divided square sprawled at the foot of the towering mountain, its cobblestones glistening under a midday sky thick with dark clouds. Sharp gusts of cool air bit at Fynra's skin, mingling with the metallic scent of anger and acrid smoke from recent fires, reminders of violence simmering beneath the surface. Shouts and chants surged through the air, an urgent rhythm echoing in her chest, while flickering torches cast restless shadows across the crumbling stone walls, their graffiti-shrouded surfaces whispering tales of struggle and defiance. Fynra steeled herself, aware that the chaos surrounding her was not merely a backdrop, but a call to action, demanding her attention amidst the turmoil. Fynra stepped deeper into the chaos, the uneven cobblestones shifting beneath her boots. The roughness contrasted sharply with her palm, which had brushed against a trembling child just moments before. Tension crackled in the air, every whispered curse and distant chant echoing in her mind, each syllable a nagging reminder of her inaction. A lingering taste of smoke clung to her tongue, sour and bitter, as she wrestled with a rising knot of fear. Cynar's low, menacing voice curled around her thoughts, warning her of lurking dangers, urging her to retreat from the fray that threatened to engulf her. Around her, the crowd surged, bodies colliding in a desperate push for resolution. The flickering torches cast warmth against her cheeks, yet the chill of the air seeped deeper, paralyzing her resolve. She glanced toward the rickety stage at the center of the square, its dilapidated structure barely holding together, yet standing as a beacon of hope for some. The sound of feet pounding against stone rose like a heartbeat, mingling with distant chants, a warning of the storm brewing ahead. Each face in the crowd reflected her own turmoil, mirroring fear, anger, and desperation that festered in the divided square. Fynra's breath quickened as she spotted the child, still trembling, eyes wide with confusion and pain. Guilt crashed over her, heavy and suffocating, as the cobblestones felt unforgiving beneath her. Yet Cynar loomed in her thoughts, a dark spectre warning her of the costs of resistance. Caught between guilt and fear, she sensed the air crackling with urgency, every second dragging her deeper into a moral chasm. A cry rang out, shattering the tension, and she readied herself, the cool breeze swirling around her. Iron filled her mouth, a stark reminder of the violence lurking just beneath the surface. This is it. I must choose. With a deep breath, Fynra squared her shoulders, the weight of uncertainty shifting as she faced the chaos. The atmosphere was electric, shadows dancing in anticipation of her choice. She would not retreat, not this time. With a voice that trembled yet grew stronger with every... Chapter 3. Embers of Resolve. Dawn broke over the divided square. A cool breeze, carrying the metallic tang of anger, mingled with the acrid scent of smoke that clung to the stones. Fynra Zelthar stood at the edge of the square, her pulse quickened, matching the rhythmic thumping of feet against cobblestones. The air buzzed with whispers, the tension thick and palpable. Shadows loomed, and a small figure caught her eye, cornered, radiating fear. Memories of a distant planet, where the sweetness of fruit trees danced in the air, clashed with her harsh reality. The burden of her past failures settled heavily on her as she stepped forward, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Fynra moved, her feet pressing against the rough texture of the cobblestones, the familiar grit grounding her. She hummed softly, a melody echoing the lullabies she'd once sung to soothe the children of her home planet. But this tune felt far less comforting now. The child's pleading gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment she paused, her breath hitched. Was this truly how it would end? Another innocent lost to chaos? No, she couldn't let it happen. "Hey, just back off, will you?" she called, her voice urgent yet measured, breaking the tension around them. Cynar Thrax emerged from the shadows, her presence as chilling as the dawn. Memories of their past flooded Fynra's mind. Cynar's lessons, her unwavering belief in the balance of power. But this was different. Cynar's cold, calculating eyes met Fynra's, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "Ah, Fynra, how quaint. Do you truly believe you can intervene?" "This is merely nature's law at work," she said, her voice smooth, dripping with bitter cynicism that twisted Fynra's stomach. Fynra's hands fidgeted, fingers tracing the faded tattoo on her wrist, a broken chain, a reminder of the freedom she once sought. I can't let this happen, Cynar. You taught me to protect the innocent, to..." The weight of Cynar's gaze made her throat tighten. The crowd around them swelled, whispers morphing into a low hum of discontent. Fynra's heart raced.
each beat a reminder of her own past, of her home torn apart by conflict. The smell of smoke ignited a flicker of panic. This was what she had fled from, this chaos, this helplessness. Cynar stepped closer, the space between them crackling with unspoken threats. "And what will you do? You think you can stop me? This is not your world anymore, Fynra. You have no power here, not after everything we've worked for." Each word felt like a dagger twisting deeper into her resolve. The child's frightened whimpers echoed in her ears. She couldn't back down now.
The divided square stretched wide beneath dark, brooding clouds, the cobblestone expanse alive with crackling tension. Smoke from fires that had raged through the night lingered, mingling with the metallic scent of blood and sweat that awakened memories for Fynra Zelthar. The rhythmic chants of the factions surged like a tide, drowning out the cries of a wounded child nearby. Each uneven step on the fractured stones reminded her of the chaos washing over her. Fynra's thin cloak provided scant comfort against the sharp morning air. The echoes of her past haunted her most. This time she would not stand by. She had to act. She had to save the child. Fynra's gaze darted to the child, crumpled and vulnerable on the stone, blood seeping through the fabric of their torn clothes. "Please, I have to save them. I must," she thought, urgency swelling within her. Yet Cynar Thrax loomed ahead, a shadowy barrier between her and the innocent life in peril. His presence felt suffocating, a coldness that stifled her determination. "Fynra, think carefully before you act. You know what's at stake," he warned, his tone smooth yet edged with chilling reality, sending a shiver down her spine. His words hung heavy, a reminder of the choices she had faced before. Fynra hesitated, the rough cobblestones biting into her feet, battling the instinct to retreat. Memories of her past flashed before her, tales of those crushed by the very decisions she now faced. "Please, I have to," she stammered, her voice faltering, as she met Cynar's calculating gaze, searching for a flicker of understanding. The air thickened between them, charged with unspoken threats and hidden fears. Cynar stepped closer, his voice cutting through the tension. "You wish to play the hero? How quaint, but do remember, every decision has its price. You will pay dearly for your naivety, Fynra. I possess evidence that could shatter your fragile existence." His cold certainty pierced through her resolve. Fynra felt urgency swell as the child cried out again, a sound that cut through the cacophony surrounding them. "You don't understand what it means to protect the innocent, Cynar. She hesitated, the memories of her past clawing at her. "I won't let another life be lost because of fear. I can't." Her eyes locked on the child's wide gaze, mirroring her turmoil. For a brief moment, Cynar's expression softened, revealing the mentor she once respected before it vanished behind cold calculation. "You wish to play the hero, be my guest, but know this, every action has consequences. You step into that chaos, and I will make your past scream louder than any of those chants." The divided square lay drenched in morning light, yet a palpable tension rippled through the air. A small child, bloodied and crumpled on the cobblestones, drew Fynra Zelthar's focus. She had to reach him before it was too late. The atmosphere was thick with unease, a constant reminder that she had until the end of the week to commit the act that would save lives or watch innocents suffer. With urgency clawing at her throat, she lunged forward. 3 days remained before consequences would become irreversible. She couldn't let this child fall victim to Cynar's brutality. The square's crumbling stone walls echoed the cries of the oppressed, and Fynra felt the weight of their hopes pressing against her as she fought against the rising tide of despair. Fynra's breath quickened as she reached the child, a small figure curled in pain, his whimpers cutting through the chaos. "Please, just let me help," she shouted, desperation flooding her voice. But as she reached out, a shadow loomed over her. Cynar Thrax. He towered above her, an imposing figure with piercing eyes that gleamed with malice. "What do you think you're doing, little girl?" he sneered, his voice low and menacing. Panic surged within her. Instinct urged her to flee, but the child needed her. Time was slipping away, and the threat of Cynar tightened around her like a noose. "You dare defy me?" Cynar's voice sliced through the air. Fynra froze, her pulse racing. His gaze bore down on her, a challenge wrapped in menace. The weight of her past failures loomed large, but the child, a mere boy, was the one suffering from Cynar's violence. If she backed down now, what would that mean for him?
Would she again prioritize her safety over an innocent life? The urgency pressed around her, demanding action before it was too late. "I'll kill anyone who dares to intervene." Cynar continued, his tone dripping with threat. The crowd around them held their breath, fear palpable in the air. Fynra's hands trembled. The choice laid bare. Help the child and risk Cynar's wrath, or turn away and live with the horror of inaction. The blood on the cobblestones was a grim reminder of what was at stake. With a deep breath, Fynra steeled herself, determination igniting her voice. "I won't let you hurt him," she shouted, stepping forward. Cynar's lips curled into a cruel smile, surprise flickering in his eyes. This was her moment, her stand. But just as she reached for the child, a sudden crack echoed through the square, and the ground trembled beneath them. Chaos loomed, and Fynra knew this was just the beginning of a fight that would demand everything from her.
Dusk draped the divided square in a shroud of deepening shadows, the last flickers of daylight swallowed by the heavy clouds overhead. Beneath her feet, the cobblestones felt cold and uneven, their rough surfaces a testament to countless steps taken in this place of unrest. The sharp bite of the evening air pierced her thin cloak, mingling with the metallic tang of fear and anger that hung in the atmosphere. As Fynra stood in the shadows of the crumbling stone walls, the echoes of anguished cries mingled with the rhythmic thud of boots against stone, a reminder of the turmoil unfolding around her. She clenched her fists, the roughness of the stones scratching against her palms. Her inaction weighed heavily on her shoulders. The flickering torches around the square cast long, wavering shadows that danced across the fractured benches, their light barely illuminating the faces twisted in anguish and determination. Shouts erupted from the crowd, a cacophony of voices filled with both hope and despair, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. The scent of smoke from recent fires lingered in the air, a stark reminder of the chaos from only hours before, mixing with the bitter taste of bile rising in her throat. If she didn't act, the moment would slip away like smoke, leaving only regret in its wake. The uneven texture of the stones beneath her boots felt like a warning, each step a reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. With every shout from the rickety stage at the center of the square, where desperate leaders called for justice, Fynra's resolve wavered. The urgency in the voices around her tugged at her heart, a painful reminder of the child who had suffered while she hesitated. The tension in the crowd thickened, urging her towards the small stage, the center of their unrest. What if she took her place among them? What if her voice could be the rallying cry they needed? As she stood at the edge of the square, the dark clouds overhead cast a shadow on her resolve, deepening the turmoil within her. The shadows thickened around her, yet a flicker of courage ignited within. I should do something," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the crowd's roar, as if the very air was charged with the weight of her indecision. Cynar's earlier words echoed in her mind, "We must address this chaos with precision and authority." She could no longer remain a spectator in this theater of suffering while time slipped away. The air buzzed with possibility, a promise of change that urged her forward, even as fear clawed at her throat. In that moment, clarity cut through the haze of her guilt, like a blade anticipation sparked in her chest as the flickering torches illuminated her path, their flames dancing in the encroaching darkness. She could no longer stand by, the consequences of her choice echoed in her mind. With a deep breath, the sun hung low over the divided square, casting elongated shadows across the cobblestones where Fynra Zelthar stood, her pulse quickening, a frantic drum in her chest. She had to confront Cynar before the week ended. The clock ticked down ominously in her mind, each moment a reminder that the innocent child trapped in that merciless world was running out of time. The chaotic shouts and angry gestures of the factions swirled around her, thickening the air with tension. There was no room for hesitation. I just want to help the child, Cynar, please, can't you see?" she demanded, her voice a desperate plea that cut through the din. Doubt crept in, tightening her stomach as she faced the man who held her past in his hands. Cynar's lips twisted into a mocking grin, and his eyes sparkled with malice. "Ah, Fynra, your history brims with intriguing complexities. Do you truly believe the factions would heed your call?" His words slithered into her ears, wrapping around her throat like a noose. She hesitated, breath shallow. If she pushed him, he would strike hard. The child's cries echoed in her mind, urging her forward, but Cynar's threat weighed heavily on her. Time pressed against her like a vice, tightening with every heartbeat. The week was almost over.
She had to make a choice, and fast. A sudden commotion erupted nearby, a violent clash that displaced bodies and sent shockwaves through the crowd. Adrenaline coursed through her, fueling her urgency. Cynar's attention wavered, drawn to the chaos. "This isn't over, Fynra," she snarled, but in that moment she saw her chance. She pushed forward, ready to intervene, the child's life hanging in the balance. But the outburst only deepened her entanglement with Cynar, the realization striking her, a cold wave of dread washing over her. Would saving the child mean sealing her own fate? "You don't have to do this," she called out, desperation lacing her tone. But Cynar's eyes glittered with something darker, a predator savoring the hunt. "Oh, but I do. You see, if you interfere, I'll make sure you regret it. They'll believe me, not you. You have 3 days, Fynra. 3 days until the child suffers forever, unless you take a leap into the abyss alongside me." The time pressure clawed at her insides, reminding her that every second counted, and she stood in the crossfire, torn between the child's fate and her own survival. Fynra's mind raced, the gravity of her decision settling over her like a heavy shroud. The factions clamored, chaos erupting as Cynar slipped away, a shadow blending into the turmoil. She stood there, heart pounding, choices swirling like the dust around her feet.
Chapter 4. Echoes of Resolve. As dusk draped its indigo cloak over the spire of divides, Fynra stepped onto the circular platform, the rough stone chilling her bare feet. Shadows stretched across the ancient carvings that adorned the stage, murmuring secrets of generations past. The crisp mountain air, tinged with the earthy scent of pine, filled her lungs, invigorating yet heavy with the tension of impending conflict. On the horizon the last rays of sunlight flickered, igniting the metallic accents of the spire, a stark contrast to the jagged stone looming above her. A distant rumble thrummed through the valley, a discordant mix of voices that mirrored her mounting apprehension. "Cynar!" Fynra's voice sliced through the tension, reverberating against the stone walls like a battle cry. The crowd, a writhing mass of faces torn between loyalty and dissent, turned toward her. She could taste fear in the air, mingling with the lingering sweetness of smoke wafting from distant campfires. Each breath felt charged as her gaze locked onto Cynar's smug expression, his silhouette framed by the dying light. The murmurs escalated into a cacophony. Still she stood firm, the rough texture of the stone anchoring her resolve. "Do you genuinely believe you have the intellectual capacity to influence their opinions, Fynra?" Cynar's voice dripped with mockery, but the quiver in his tone betrayed his uncertainty. Shadows danced around them, wrapping his figure in darkness as the first stars blinked into existence above. I feel they ought to understand the truth, don't you think?" she shouted. The crowd erupted in a chorus of roars and jeers, the sound crashing against her, like waves against the cliffs below. A thunderous boom shattered the night, reverberating through the spire of divides like a beast awakening from slumber. Fynra's breath quickened as the acrid scent of gunpowder stung her nostrils, and chaos erupted around her. The ground trembled beneath her feet, the once familiar stone stage feeling foreign, alive with the pulse of danger. She and Cynar stood frozen, their expressions a mix of shock and resolve as the crowd surged, panic igniting like wildfire. Shadows flickered in the deepening darkness, uncertainty swirling around them. In that breathless moment their fates intertwined, a precarious balance hanging in the air. As the chaos unfolded, silence descended over the spire, broken only by the distant echoes of the turmoil. The gathering shadows whispered threats, and the taste of anxiety lingered on her tongue. She glanced at Cynar, his expression unreadable amid. The divided square pulsed with unrest as dusk cloaked the city in shadow. Fynra Zelthar, a tall figure with intense eyes and a resolute stance, stood at the heart of the chaos, the cries of the crowd swirling around her like a tempest. They clamored for justice, their voices intertwining with the thick air of desperation that enveloped the space. The weight of her recent actions pressed heavily on her chest, an anchor dragging her deeper into turmoil. If Fynra didn't act decisively before the week was over, the consequences would be irreversible, more lives shattered, more pain inflicted. She inhaled sharply, the metallic tang of fear stinging her senses. Time slipped away, dragging with it her chance to reclaim control. She needed a plan against Cynar,
but her thoughts were a muddle of doubt and regret, paralyzing her resolve. The crowd's murmurs escalated into a cacophony, urgency brewing like a storm. Fynra sensed the weight of their expectation, a palpable pressure pushing her forward. How could she offer a solution when haunted by the ghosts of her failures? A child's wail sliced through the clamor, a reminder of what was at stake. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe as memories of loss swirled in her mind. The stakes felt surreal. Faltering now would mean not just atonement for her past, but the future of a city crumbling before her. She had to find her voice, but the shadows of doubt clung to her like a shroud. Then, as if summoned by her turmoil, Cynar emerged from the shadows, his silhouette sharp against the dimming light. A smug grin played on his lips, a predator savoring the chaos. "Pray tell, Fynra, what afflicts you? Have you lost your capacity for eloquence in this discord?" he taunted, stepping closer. Panic surged within her as the crowd shifted, anticipation crackling in the air. She had to act, had to reclaim control, but his presence loomed over her like a dark cloud suffocating her resolve. Each moment spent hesitating was a moment the innocent would suffer. "You think they'll listen to you?" Cynar leaned in, his breath hot against her skin. "They're hungry for blood, Fynra, and you've given them plenty to chew on. What's your plan? More promises, more failure." Each word felt like a dagger twisting in her gut. The crowd's impatience was palpable, the countdown to their demands echoing in her mind. 3 days left, 3 days before the innocent would pay the price for her indecision. Fynra clenched her fists, fighting the urge to flee. She had to strategize. The fate of the city hung in the balance, yet Cynar's taunts constantly reminded her of her fragility. Cynar's smirk deepened, his unwavering confidence stark against the turmoil that twisted within her. Could she truly confront him?
The divided square thrummed with unrest, like a bowstring pulled taut, ready to snap. Fynra stood at its center, the young woman's plea echoing in her ears, a desperate call for help amidst the murmur of a restless crowd. Faces turned toward her, eyes wide with expectation, yet a veil of doubt hung low over their expressions. Cynar's presence loomed nearby, a dark shadow against the midday sun, his lips curling into a smirk that twisted her resolve. The air thickened with tension, heavy with the unspoken fears and hopes of the gathering. Justice was within reach, but loyalty held its grip, and the clock ticked, each chime a reminder of the stakes. "People of the square," Fynra steadied her voice, forcing it to be strong despite the tremor that betrayed her fear. "We stand at a crossroads. Cynar seeks to divide us, to manipulate our fears and turn us against one another. Look around. We cannot let his lies seep into our hearts." Her hands surged upward, fingers splayed like a beacon, urging them to rally. Yet the crowd shifted uneasily, their eyes flickering with doubt. She pressed on, each syllable a plea for unity amidst the encroaching shadows. Cynar stepped forward, smooth and calculated, the crowd parting for him like a wave. "A most intriguing narrative you present, Fynra. However, I must inquire what merit can be found in your interpretation of justice. Your hands are just as dirty. You offer them hope, but your path is littered with the broken bodies of those who dared to stand against you." Each word was a dagger, expertly aimed at her heart. Fynra's stomach twisted, a mix of anger and despair clawing at her as her supporters' eyes darted away. Doubt gnawed at her resolve, and she clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms. How could she wrestle them back from the brink? "Cynar speaks of loyalty," she shouted, desperation tinged in her voice. "But what is loyalty to a tyrant, to a man who thrives on our divisions? We must remember who we are." She scanned the sea of faces for a glimmer of recognition, but found only indifference. The crowd roared for Cynar, their allegiance a blade that sliced through her resolve. A heaviness settled in her chest as the cheers echoed around her. Was it too late? The crowd surged, torn between two leaders, and Fynra's voice faltered. She watched Cynar bask in the adoration of his followers. Each cheer for him felt like a blow, building a wall she could not scale. Were her efforts meaningless? Was their unity an illusion? She tightened her grip on the podium, her knuckles white, and swallowed hard, willing herself to stand firm despite the storm inside. A silence fell over the divided square. The divided square lay heavy beneath the dusky sky, shadows creeping along the cracked cobblestones like whispered secrets. Fynra Zelthar stood at the center, the air sharp and cool, laced with the metallic scent of anger and the acrid tang of smoke from recent fires.
Distant chants fluttered through the tension, a rhythmic pulse echoing the unrest brewing around her. Memories of her home world swirled, the faint aroma of charred earth haunting her. A shudder passed through her at the flickering torches illuminating the faces of her faction, their expressions woven with hope and despair. Fynra fidgeted with the frayed edges of her notebook, the stories of the oppressed contained within, weighing heavily on her. What had brought them to this moment? Fynra's gaze flitted over the crowd, searching for familiar faces among the throng. Cynar Thrax stood near the fountain, posture commanding, eyes glinting like blades. Fynra felt a heaviness in her chest. Cynar's charisma drew people in, but her words carried a chilling edge. They lacked the foresight to comprehend Fynra. Their thirst for power eclipses the pursuit of peace. We must capitalize on this moment lest we face obliteration, Cynar said, her tone smooth yet cold. Fynra hesitated, the warmth of her melodies fading into a dissonant hum. What was she willing to sacrifice? The familiar scent of burning wood wafted through the air, a reminder of the fires that had razed her home. Fynra's breath caught. Here it was again, a spectre haunting her every step. She grounded herself against the swell of anxiety, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. "But if we strike back, won't we just keep the cycle going?" she said, her voice trembling slightly, eyes avoiding the searching gazes around her. A group of supporters huddled together, their voices low but urgent. "If we strike first, we'll unite the factions." One of them urged, a spark of fervor igniting the others. The pull of their words tugged at Fynra, the dangerous allure of decisive action looming before her. But what if it ignited a firestorm? She took a tentative step closer, the cobblestones uneven beneath her feet. "Please, think about the consequences," she began, but the crowd's excitement drowned her out, their fervor rising like a tide. They were hungry for action, and the gulf between her and them widened. "Fynra, you're too soft, too afraid of the dark truths." "This is war," Cynar interjected, her tone a mix of challenge and disdain. Fynra's mind raced, Cynar's accusations stung. She wanted to scream, to hum a melody that would soothe their fears, but the notes tangled in her throat. I just want to protect what's left," she said softly.
The divided square was alive with tension, shadows flickering across the cobblestones, as the midday sun struggled to penetrate the thick veil of unease. Fynra stood at the makeshift stage, each beat of the crowd echoing the cries of a fractured community. The air was sharp, tinged with the metallic scent of anger and the acrid remnants of smoke, ghosts of the fires that once tore through her home world. She inhaled deeply, her mind swirling like leaves caught in a gust, the familiar melody of her childhood humming softly in the back of her thoughts, a delicate comfort amid the chaos. Fynra's fingers fidgeted with the edges of her notebook, worn with the weight of countless stories, a fragile tether to the people she sought to protect. Today, she would not let history repeat itself. Not again. Fynra stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper at first. We must come together against Cynar's lies. If we stand united, perhaps we can overcome this division. Our strength, it's in our stories, the quiet voices that have been silenced. They matter. You matter." The crowd shifted, uncertainty rippling through the throng. She paused, a faint melody escaping her lips, a soothing hum that seemed to calm her racing heart. Yet she glanced at the ground, the cobblestones reminding her of the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders. Cynar emerged from the throng, a smirk playing on her lips. "Ah, Fynra, as always you pursue dreams wrapped in whispers. Do you truly believe that such fleeting echoes can salvage our plight? What we require is decisive action, not idle fantasies. Dreamers do not create change. They merely observe as the world descends into chaos. Wouldn't you concur, dear Fynra?" The crowd hesitated. A collective breath held the tide shifting as Cynar's charm spilled forth like poison. A weight settled in Fynra's chest as she grappled with her memories, her home burning, the cries of her people lost in the flames. "No, that's not true." Fynra's voice rose, a tremor running through her melodic tone. "We can change the narrative. I've gathered countless stories, fragments of lives torn apart by lies. We can learn from them. We can stand together against this chaos." She scanned the faces before her, searching for a flicker of recognition, but Cynar's icy gaze swept through the crowd, turning their eyes away from her. "You're desperate, Fynra. Desperation clouds judgment. How can you lead when you can't even keep your own thoughts straight?
Look at you, lost in memories of a world that's no longer yours. It's time to face reality. The crowd responded, a murmur of agreement buzzing through the air, and the
Chapter 5. The Dawn of Resolve. Dawn broke over the divided square, casting the cobblestones in hues of crimson and gold. Despite the vibrant colours, Fynra Zelthar felt a heavy dread settle in her stomach. With only hours left before Cynar Thrax's forces would descend upon the festival, the innocents gathered remained blissfully unaware of their looming peril. "Please, you have to listen to me," she urged softly, her voice barely rising above the idle chatter. Time slipped away from her. If she failed to act before the week ended, innocent lives would be lost, a burden she could not bear again. Fueled by determination, Fynra pressed through the crowd, fighting against a tide of ignorance and complacency. Fynra maneuvered through the throng, her eyes darting as she searched for a way to reach the unsuspecting festival-goers. "Listen, you must," she began again, but a hand shot out and seized her wrist, yanking her backward. A loyalist stood before her, his gaze cold and unyielding, Cynar's faction emblem glaring from his chest. "Silence, traitor! Your fabrications hold no weight here." The crowd continued their idle chatter, oblivious to the impending doom. Fynra struggled against his grip, each second pulling them closer to disaster. "They're coming. You have to believe me. You think you can scare us?" The loyalist taunted, leaning closer, his breath hot against her face. Laughter and music filled the air, the crowd's ignorance thick like fog. "They'll kill you all," she exclaimed, desperation spilling into her words. The loyalist laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "Get her out of here!" Another loyalist barked, and the crowd shifted, pulling away from her pleas, sealing their fate further. The first explosion erupted, a thunderous blast that shattered the morning calm. Fynra froze, fear gripping her as the ground trembled beneath her feet. Shouts erupted from the crowd, confusion swirling like a storm. She turned, her breath catching as smoke billowed in the distance, thick and menacing. "No!" she screamed, wrenching her arm free, just as chaos unfurled around her. People stumbled, their screams piercing the air. The loyalists faltered, their bravado crumbling as the reality of the attack sank in. Fynra's heart sank with the weight of her failure. She had tried to save them, but now they were trapped in Cynar's malevolence. This was only the beginning. "Get to safety!" she shouted, pushing against the stampede, her resolve hardening. But as another explosion roared, she was thrown to the ground, darkness closing in as the world spiraled out of. At dawn, the divided square stretched out like a vast cobblestone battlefield, shadowed by the looming mountain spire. Fractured stone benches lined the perimeter, smoothed by the wear of countless protests. The heavy sky draped itself in dark clouds, casting a foreboding shadow over the gathering crowd. An electric tension hung in the air, anxiety palpable as whispers of division echoed like distant thunder. Flickering torches illuminated the rickety stage at the center, where cries for justice mingled with a growing urgency. Fynra Zelthar, her chest tight with anxiety and her dark hair whipping around her face, stood at the edge of the chaos, scanning the crowd for familiar faces amid the turmoil. Fynra whispered to herself, "I have to get through, I have to find them," as she hesitantly pushed her way through the loyalists. Each step felt like wading through molasses, her resolve battling the overwhelming chaos. As she neared the center of the square, a second wave of explosions erupted, shaking the ground violently. Debris rained down, and she stumbled but steadied herself. Frantically, she searched for the innocents, hands trembling as she navigated through the throng of panicked bodies and swirling smoke. The fear clawed at her insides, but she forced herself to keep moving, knowing she had to find them before it was too late. The square devolved into a cacophony of screams and chaos, faces twisted in terror as people fled. Fynra's breaths quickened, and she called out for anyone she recognized, her voice nearly drowned out by the pandemonium. Shadows danced along the cobblestones, illuminated by flickering torchlight, and she fought against the tide of fleeing bodies, each step a battle against a relentless current. Her mind raced, grappling with every possible outcome as she pressed on. Just as despair began to settle in, Fynra spotted a small figure crouched behind one of the stone benches, trembling with fear. Relief flooded her as she recognized one of the innocents she had been searching for. Without a second thought, she plunged into the crowd, determination burning bright within her.
Just as she reached the child, another explosion rocked the square, but Fynra instinctively shielded the innocent with her body, vowing to protect them at all costs. Amid the chaos, a fierce sense of purpose surged within her. She would not let fear claim them today.
Dawn broke over the divided square, casting a pale light on cobblestones littered with debris from the previous night's chaos. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burnt root vegetables and lingering smoke as a street vendor stirred his pot of stewed legumes, his face ashen. In the shadows, laborers quietly collected the remnants of the wreckage, hands calloused from years of toil, murmuring prayers to Teshar for protection from the ongoing strife. Above, dark clouds loomed, casting an ominous shadow over the square, where whispers of division echoed like distant thunder. With each step, Fynra sprinted toward the shadows where innocents huddled, fueled by determination, but Cynar's loyalists loomed ahead, their cold eyes fixed on her. Fynra took a deep breath, tasting ash on her tongue as she pressed forward. The loyalists formed an unyielding wall, their expressions hardened by loyalty or fear. It was impossible to discern. One of them, a burly man with a scarred cheek, crossed his arms and glared at her. "You shouldn't be here, Zelthar," he growled, his voice like gravel. I can't leave them," she shouted, desperation fueling her resolve as she pushed past him. With a sudden surge, she ducked under a swinging arm and rushed forward, each step echoing with urgency to save those trapped in the chaos. A deafening explosion rocked the ground, sending a wave of heat and debris crashing around her. As she stumbled into the square, the sight of the crowd huddled together crushed her spirit, their faces pale and filled with terror. The remnants of a once bustling marketplace lay in ruins. Among the scattered goods, a broken piece of pottery, a half-eaten loaf of bread, she spotted lifeless forms caught in the blast. Despair clawed at her insides as she fought back tears. Cynar emerged from the shadows, his presence as imposing as the mountains framing the town. He surveyed the chaos with unsettling calm, the flicker of a smirk playing on his lips. "These measures are, regrettably, necessary, Fynra. You understand the importance of such decisions." "Necessary? You've taken innocent lives," she spat, anger surging through her. He shrugged, his tailored coat deep blue, embroidered with silver thread shimmering in the morning light. "A few sacrifices for the greater good, dear sister. They were weak, you should learn to accept that." Her voice trembled with fury. "You speak of the vanished as if they were mere stories. They had lives, families." Cynar's eyes glinted with cold amusement. "And now they serve as a reminder that we must be strong. Focus on survival, not sentimentality." The cries of the wounded filled the air. As dusk settled over the divided square, the scent of ash mingled with the metallic tang of iron, creating an oppressive atmosphere. Fynra surveyed the charred marketplace, where families huddled around flickering fires, sharing meager portions of stewed lentils and turnips. Their faces glowed in the dim light, shadows dancing across their features, amplifying the weight of their despair. Cynar's towering figure stood apart from the sorrow, relaxed as he tore into a piece of roasted mountain game, his laughter a jarring contrast to the grief surrounding them. Nearby, a small boy offered fried dough to a weary woman, his soot-stained hands a testament to the day's struggles, yet his smile shone with innocence, a painful reminder of what was lost. Fynra's gaze swept over the remnants of the crowd, disbelief etched on their faces, a stark reminder of her perceived failure to protect them. Anger simmered beneath her skin as Cynar approached, grease smeared across his mouth. They were weak, Fynra. The strong survive, the weak must perish. This was necessary for our progress, he declared, offering her a piece of his meat, which she instinctively recoiled from, the act feeling like a cruel mockery. The boy in the distance turned to Cynar, seeking approval, and an uncomfortable churn rose in her gut. "You don't see what's happening here," she shouted, fists clenched. "This isn't strength. These people deserved better." Cynar's laughter faded, uncertainty creeping into his features. He stepped closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Strength, my dear Fynra, is the only language they understand. It's a harsh truth we must accept. The Keeper of Shadows has shown us what must be done." Beneath the weight of his words, Fynra felt the ground solidify beneath her, yet an unsettling murmur of agreement rippled through the few who remained, their eyes downcast as if invoking Teshar's name would absolve them of their complicity.
With a deep breath, Fynra turned away, seeking refuge among the flickering fires. The flames offered scant comfort as she approached a woman stirring a pot of thick stew, steam rising into the cool air like whispered prayers. She offered a slight bow, murmuring, "With honor, I stand before you," as the woman filled her bowl with a generous scoop of the earthy mixture. Fynra took a spoonful, the flavors grounding her temporarily, but the taste soured as Cynar's words echoed in her mind. Had she truly failed to inspire their strength? The night deepened, shadows creeping across the square, cloaking her in uncertainty. She glanced back at Cynar, now regaling a group with tales of their achievements, his voice rising above the crackle of the fires, twisting horror into justification. As she stood there, the burden of their fallen weighed heavily on her heart. Clutching the bowl,
the divided square sprawled beneath a heavy dusk, its cobblestones marred by the wreckage of conflict. Twisted metal and charred remnants littered the ground, casting elongated shadows that danced like ghosts in the fading light. Fynra Zelthar stood amidst the devastation, her breath shallow and quick. Guilt gnawed at her as she surveyed the aftermath of Cynar's ruthless ambition. 3 days remained until a fateful decision loomed, a choice that could haunt her forever. Each second that ticked by felt like a betrayal to the innocents lost, their lives extinguished in the chaos. A child's doll, half buried in debris, stared up at her with painted eyes that pierced her heart, twisting her stomach in knots. Panic surged through Fynra as she realized she couldn't remain silent while Cynar rationalized this massacre. Confronting him felt like grasping a knife, both necessary and perilous. As she wrestled with her thoughts, the imposing figure of Cynar Thrax approached, his demeanor radiating an unsettling confidence. He was the architect of this chaos, and the pressure of her inaction pressed down on her like a heavy cloak. Cynar's voice cut through the tension. "Fynra, the sacrifices today are not just necessary, they are essential for the greater good. Each life lost is a stepping stone toward a future where oppression is eradicated," he stated, his tone dripping with superiority. Fynra's fists clenched, anger bubbling beneath the weight of her guilt. How could she let him go unchallenged? Yet the fear of repercussions loomed larger than the wreckage around them, a silent threat that held her tongue captive. I don't understand how you can justify this, Cynar. Innocents. They were so innocent. We were supposed to protect them." Her words spilled out, raw and desperate. Cynar's expression hardened, shadows flickering ominously around them. "Protecting them means making hard choices, Fynra. Choices you seem unwilling to make. If you want to save lives, you must be prepared to act before the week is out." The weight of his ultimatum settled heavily on her heart. Time slipped away, and the urgency of her decision felt like a drumbeat against her chest. As another explosion echoed through the square, shaking her resolve, she realized her choice could lead to more despair, one she might not be ready to bear. Chapter 6. Embers of Resolve. Dawn broke over the spire of divides, casting fragile light on the rough stone stage. Fynra knelt, fingers brushing the cool earth, the scent of pine mingling with the dampness of the morning, awakening memories of her home planet, a place where laughter once echoed, now silenced by turmoil. The air crackled with the tension of impending conflict as her heart raced, each beat a reminder of the lives at stake. Her hands trembled, fidgeting with the edges of her frayed cloak, while her gaze remained fixed on the ground, searching for courage among the shadows. The artifact lay hidden beneath the stage, a beacon of hope, and she was running out of time to claim it. Fynra's fingers finally brushed against the artifact, its surface smooth and cold, sending a shiver through her. The metallic gleam reminded her of the sound waves she once manipulated back when her gift was a source of fear. She paused, breathing deeply, trying to ignore the way her heart raced in her chest. "Please let this work," she whispered, closing her eyes as she gathered her thoughts into a fragile melody. The hum of her voice mingled with the morning air, a soft plea for strength, but just as she began to channel her energy, a shadow loomed over her. Cynar Thrax stood there, an imposing figure against the dawn, a smirk twisting her lips. "What do we have here, Fynra? A little treasure hunt?" Cynar's voice was smooth, a serpent's whisper, dripping with mockery. Fynra's stomach twisted. Her instinct screamed to flee, to vanish into the quietness she craved, but the lives waiting for her in the valley anchored her. I need it," Fynra stammered, forcing herself to meet Cynar's piercing gaze. The warmth of the morning sun contrasted sharply with the chill emanating from Cynar.
You don't understand. I'm trying to help them. Cynar stepped closer, her presence suffocating. Help? Or are you just trying to redeem your own failures? I know your past, Fynra. You think you can atone by playing the savior? Cynar's words sliced through the air, each one a reminder of the pain Fynra had fled from, the guilt that shadowed her every step. Fynra's fingers tightened around the artifact, her resolve hardening against the onslaught. I won't let you use it for your own gain, she said, her voice a whisper but steady, a fragile melody growing in strength. I will protect them, even if it means breaking my own heart again. The weight of her words hung between them as she felt the pulse of the artifact beneath her palm, a heartbeat of its own, urging her on. Cynar's smile faded, replaced by a cold calculation. You think you can wield such power? I can take it from you, you know. No one would stop me. Your precious innocence will suffer, and you'll be left with nothing but your regrets. Again. The threat lingered in the air, thick and suffocating, and Fynra's breath caught.
The dawn light spilled over the jagged peaks of the spire of divides, enfolding Fynra in a fragile embrace. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, remnants of fears that clawed at her resolve. The artifact pulsed in her hands, its rhythm a reminder of the confrontation with Cynar that weighed heavily on her thoughts. Lives hung in the balance, and each breath bore the weight of inaction. A storm raged within her, mirroring the chaos outside. She had to choose, step forward, or retreat into darkness. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with the energy of the impending conflict below. Fynra gripped the artifact tighter, its energy thrumming through her veins. A sharp memory cut through the haze of uncertainty. The faces of the oppressed, eyes wide with expectation, hope trembling on the edge of despair. While others wielded power as a weapon, she had remained a silent witness to their suffering, no more. Doubt slashed through her mind. What if they rejected her? But she pushed it down, forcing her body to stand tall. Each heartbeat resonated with purpose, a drumbeat urging her to act. The echoes of Cynar's voice haunted her, cutting through the stillness of dawn. You dare to assume leadership? Your worthiness is highly questionable. His words scraped at her resolve, yet beneath the weight of his scorn, a flicker of defiance ignited. She had the artifact now. Power thrummed in her hands, mingling with her fear, a heady blend. Fynra's breath quickened as she recalled that leadership demanded action, her lips pressed together, determination hardening in her gut. She could be the beacon they needed if she dared to shine. The valley below stirred, muffled sounds of preparation rising. The two factions would soon collide, and she was caught in the middle, balancing on the precipice of decision. She glanced at the artifact, its glow casting a warm light in her shadowed heart. This was not just about her, it was about the countless souls who had suffered because she had stood idle. Her legs tensed, a surge of energy flowing through her. The moment had arrived, she needed to seize it. Fynra inhaled deeply, the crisp dawn air filling her with resolve. She stepped forward, the ground solid beneath her feet, a promise to herself and to those waiting below. The artifact pulsed, and she could almost hear it whispering of hope. What if she failed? The question loomed, but another flickered to life. What if she succeeded? The spire stood tall behind her, a testament to the divisions that had long held sway. But today, she would not be defined by her past. Today, she would forge a new path, one that could unite the fractured. She raised the artifact, its light illuminating the dawn, and whispered, I think I could maybe find a way to help them. The artifact thrummed in her grasp, a beacon of promise against the jagged silhouette of the spire of divides. Fynra stood at the edge of the precipice, the first light of dawn casting long shadows that twisted within her. Below, the crowd swelled, faces upturned, eyes glimmering with a mixture of hope and desperation. This was her moment. Anticipation crackled in the air, alive and electric. Whispers floated toward her, laced with fears woven into the morning mist. Behind her, the spire loomed, its height a reminder of the divisions she sought to shatter. For them, she whispered, raising the artifact high, its light spilling forth like a promise, illuminating the cracks in her resolve. Cynar Thrax's laughter resonated with sardonic clarity, echoing the superiority he felt over the chaos. She turned to face him, steadying herself as the enforcers, clad in dark armor, emerged from the shadows like wraiths summoned to snuff out her light. They moved with predatory purpose, a wall of muscle and malice. Fynra's breath quickened as her fingers clamped around the artifact. Action surged through her veins, the whispers of the crowd growing louder, urging her forward. Would they follow her? Would this artifact truly speak to them? The air thickened, charged with the weight of her choices.
Defiance coursed through her, echoing in her chest. No more hesitation. She had to act. The artifact pulsed, a rhythm echoing her resolve. Fynra steadied her breath, channeling the energy surging through her. She focused on the enforcers, their eyes glinting with intent. You won't stop me," she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. The crowd shifted behind her, a swell of energy cresting. She pressed the artifact to her chest, feeling its warmth seep into her skin. It was time to unleash its power. With a swift motion she activated it, and a blinding light erupted, cascading over the valley. But instead of the rallying cry she envisioned, a deafening roar reverberated, a sonic backlash that slammed into her like a physical force. Fynra stumbled, disoriented, the world a blur around her. Chaos erupted around her. The enforcers seized the moment, lunging forward with predatory grace. Instincts surged within Fynra. She spun, adrenaline coursing through her, her body moving not from fear, but from the primal urge to survive. She darted through the crowd, the artifact clutched tightly, its light flickering like a dying star. Voices shouted, confusion rippling through the gathering. Faces blurred as she wove through bodies, legs pumping, desperation fueling her escape. The promise of unity had morphed into a frenzied scramble, her resolve fracturing under the weight of reality. What had she unleashed? "Stop her!" a voice roared behind her.
The divided square thrummed with tension under the midday sun, its cobblestone surface reflecting the anxious energy of the gathered crowd. Fynra Zelthar gripped the ancient artifact tightly, its power vibrating through her fingers. Time was slipping away. If she didn't ignite the spirit of rebellion against Cynar Thrax, countless innocents would suffer before the week's end. This was her moment, her chance to rally the oppressed. Heart racing, she stepped forward, amplifying her voice with the artifact, ready to inspire hope. Together we can break these chains. Fynra's words resonated, drawing the crowd closer, yet Cynar's enforcers prowled like predators, their jeers slicing through her rallying cry. "You think they'll save you?" one shouted, his sneer aimed at her resolve. For a brief moment, doubt crept in, but Fynra channeled the artifact's energy, creating a wave of sound that silenced the dissenters. The crowd's eyes widened with the flicker of hope. They were listening, ready to believe. "Stand with me. Fight for your future," she called out, urgency lacing her voice. Just as she sensed a shift, Cynar Thrax stepped forward, his towering figure eclipsing her light. "This is your leader?" he bellowed, laughter rippling through his followers. Fynra's confidence wavered, the crowd's faith dimming like a fading star. With a flick of his wrist, Cynar unleashed chaos. A flash of energy sent Fynra reeling, the artifact slipping from her grasp. It clattered to the ground, gasps erupting from the crowd as uncertainty swept over them. Her mind raced. She couldn't let it end like this. No time. She had to act. Fingers brushed the cool surface of the artifact, but Cynar's enforcers closed in, eyes glinting with malice. "This is your chance to join us, Fynra. Save yourself," one taunted. Fynra's pulse quickened as she fought through the chaos, desperately trying to reclaim the artifact. The crowd's faith waned, and she locked eyes with a woman in the front row, a mixture of hope and fear solidifying her resolve. "No," she shouted, forcing her voice to rise above the noise. "You are stronger than you think. We can end this tyranny together." But as she spoke, the artifact began to dim. Would they rally or scatter? Her voice cracked, urgency clawing at her throat as she cried, "Listen to me." The crowd's uncertainty lingered, but Fynra's focus narrowed on the artifact, the last flicker of hope. She lunged for it, fingers brushing against its surface just as the enforcers lunged. Chaos erupted around her like a storm, with a surge of energy. The divided square sprawled beneath a sky bruised with heavy clouds, their dark bellies threatening rain. The cool air cut sharply against Fynra's skin, mingling with the metallic scent of anger that hung thick like fog. Beneath her worn boots, the cobblestones felt uneven and gritty, each step echoing the countless struggles etched into the ground. Crumbling stone walls loomed around her, adorned with vibrant graffiti. Cries for justice splashed against the grey, a testament to the people's unyielding spirit. At the center, a rickety stage quivered under her presence, flickering torches casting long shadows that danced like phantoms, mirroring the tension crackling in the air. The atmosphere was charged, filled with an urgency that wrapped around the crowd, whispering of division and unrest.
Fynra raised the artifact high, its light cutting through the gloom like a beacon. "We can't kneel," she shouted, her voice ringing with defiance. The crowd stirred, a ripple of hope igniting in the sea of faces marred by despair. A rumble of unease thrummed beneath the steady thump of feet on stone, and whispers twisted through the air, doubts blooming like weeds in the minds of the oppressed. The tension thickened, an electric charge making her pulse quicken as she fought to hold their gaze. As shadows stretched across the square, shouts pierced the air, growing closer. Panic rippled through the crowd, the sharp tang of fear mingling with the lingering scent of smoke from recent fires. Fynra's throat tightened, bitterness flooding her senses alongside the metallic taste of impending chaos. Enforcers, brutal and relentless, surged forth, their boots crashing against the cobblestones, drowning out the chants that had once filled the square with fervor. She could almost feel their breath on her neck, their malice looming like the storm clouds above. With every ounce of courage, she stepped toward the crowd, hands outstretched, fingers trembling against the cool air. Please won't you stand with me?" she whispered, her voice trembling against the chaos. The roughness of the stone beneath her feet grounded her, yet the urgency of the moment sent a shiver down her spine. The flickering light from the torches illuminated her face, and for a heartbeat their gazes bored into her, some radiating hope, others cloaked in doubt. The uneven texture of the cobblestones echoed her thoughts, a reminder of the rocky path ahead. As chaos erupted, Fynra's pulse raced like a frantic drumbeat, mirroring the rising tide of panic around her. Shadows merged with the crowd, flickering like ghosts caught between light and dark. She stood resolute, the artifact warm in her grasp, its power thrumming in sync with her racing pulse. The air grew heavy with tension, the scent of smoke and sweat mingled.
Chapter 7 Embers of Resolve. Dusk cast a shadow over the spire of divides, the last rays of sunlight fading as Fynra Zelthar stepped onto the makeshift platform. Each beat echoed in her chest, amplifying the gravity of her mission. This is it, she thought, urgency building within her. The factions, the oppressed, the hungry, the broken needed to unite against Cynar's tyranny. Failure was not an option. Time was slipping away. If she couldn't ignite their courage before the week was out, the innocent would suffer. She craved their resolve, their voices, yet the air buzzed with tension, a portent of chaos lurking just beyond the square. Fynra raised her voice, her words cutting through the murmur of uncertainty. "If we work together, perhaps we could fight together for our freedom, if that's all right?" The crowd shifted uneasily, glances flickering between one another like dying embers. Doubt crept into their hearts. A chill ran through her as shadows loomed at the edges of her vision, Cynar's loyalists, ever present, ready to crush dissent. The night crept in, taking their chance for unity with it. They had to act now or risk being silenced forever. A roar erupted from the back of the square as Cynar's followers surged forward, a tide of hostility that surged forward, ready to engulf her. Fynra stumbled back, struggling to maintain her balance on the platform. Her mind raced, should she fight or flee? The factions needed to see their strength, but how could she rally them amid chaos? "We don't have time for this," she shouted, trying to pierce the growing panic. But the crowd began to fracture. The loyalists were closing in, their intentions clear. She had to make them listen, or everything she fought for would be lost. As the loyalists advanced, Fynra's eyes locked onto a familiar figure lurking in the shadows. Cynar himself, leaning against a stone column. A smug smirk twisted his lips. The sight twisted her gut with dread. He had orchestrated this chaos, driving a wedge between the factions. "Regrettably, Fynra, it seems your endeavors are futile. You will inevitably cause greater suffering to those you wish to safeguard," he taunted. Panic surged within her. If she didn't act now, their chance at rebellion would vanish. With a deep breath, she shouted, "We fight, we unite, for our freedom." But the crowd hesitated, their fears battling against her desperate plea as the loyalists closed in, their intentions dark and violent. Then chaos erupted. Fists flew, and the square morphed into a battleground. Fynra struggled to keep her footing. The divided square unfolded beneath a canopy of dark clouds, cobblestones worn smooth by the burden of countless struggles. The dancing torches lining the rickety stage cast erratic shadows that flickered across the crumbling stone walls, adorned with graffiti clamoring for justice. The air, crisp with the dusk air, carried the sharp scent of smoke, wrapping around Fynra like a tight embrace, a reminder of the simmering conflict just below the surface. Whispers of dissent swirled through the crowd, each word crackling with the potential for change or violence, an electric tension that crackled in the air, urging her to act and awaken the courage within those gathered before her. Fynra stepped onto the makeshift platform, the wood creaking in protest under her weight. Beneath her, the cobblestones felt uneven, each stone a silent witness to the struggles of those who had stood here before. She searched the faces in the crowd, their expressions illuminated by the dancing flames, a potent mix of determination and trepidation. The distant chants, rising and falling, echoed through the square, a rhythmic heartbeat that mirrored her own, urging her to speak and ignite the fire of rebellion that had long been dormant. We can't keep living like this, right? Fynra's voice rang out, slicing through the tension like a blade. The crowd shifted, bodies drawn together by her declaration, the chill of the evening air mixing with the heat of their shared resolve. The acrid taste of smoke lingered on her tongue, a reminder of the recent fires that had threatened their lives. Her words reverberated off the stone walls, stirring murmurs of agreement that began to swell around her, a wave of voices eager to break free from their silence. But from the corner of her eye, Cynar Thrax observed the crowd with disdain, his voice dripping with condescension as he said, "You truly believe you can oppose me?" As his dark figures moved ominously against the dimming light, a looming threat emerged, casting a shadow over the fragile hope she was fostering. The atmosphere shifted palpably, fear creeping in as Cynar's men advanced, their boots thudding against the cobblestones like a war drum. Fynra's resolve solidified, every ounce of energy focused on the moment. "Stand with me," she called, her voice rising above the encroaching chaos, each word a challenge against the tightening grip of fear. The crowd hesitated, uncertainty flickering across their faces, but then she saw it, the spark of determination igniting in their eyes, a shared understanding that they could no longer remain voiceless. The air crackled with sweat and adrenaline, invigorating the atmosphere as she pressed on. As the tension escalated, the world around
Dusk enveloped the divided square, shadows stretching across the cobblestones like dark tendrils. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, the air charged with a sense of urgency. Fynra Zelthar stood at the center, her heartbeat echoing like a frantic drum in her chest, syncing with the rising chant of the crowd. "We must unite. Change is essential. We cannot endure tyranny any longer." The urgency crackled in the cool evening air. It was now or never. Responsibility weighed on her shoulders, constricting her movements. This was their moment, the moment she had fought for, and she would not let it slip away. Fynra's voice wove through the crowd, reaching for each soul. "Together we are stronger than their fear." But just as her message soared, a shadow flickered at the square's edge. Cynar Thrax's enforcers were drawing near, their batons reflecting the dim light like ominous harbingers of order. Fynra's stomach twisted in knots. "We don't have time," she urged, her breath quickened as she spoke. The crowd's chanting faltered, uncertainty flashing in their eyes as they recognized the approaching threat. Time was slipping through their fingers, and the weight of their decision loomed. "Stand firm," she called, her voice steadier than she felt, rallying her courage against the encroaching menace. The enforcers advanced, batons raised, and tension filled the air. The crowd's energy wavered, and Fynra locked eyes with a woman in the front row, whose determination flickered like a lone flame. "They want to silence us, but together we can drown them out." A ripple of resolve surged through the crowd, but Fynra sensed hesitation still lingering. They needed to commit, to leap into the unknown. 3 days left. Fynra stepped closer to the edge of the square, palms clammy as she fought to maintain her composure. "This is our chance to expose the corruption, to stand against the darkness." Suddenly, a shout erupted from the rear. One of Cynar's enforcers had spotted a familiar face among the crowd. A young boy, no more than 10, trembling and pale. "Get back!" The shout sliced through the air, and Fynra's heart dropped. "No, we won't cower," she roared, a fire igniting within her. The crowd surged behind her, their collective strength igniting a spark of hope that dispelled the shadows. With every heartbeat, their courage surged forward, urging her to rise against the tide of oppression, even as the enforcers closed in. As the first enforcer reached the front lines, tension crackled in the air. Fynra stood tall, fists clenched,
ready to fight back with words and will. "We are the voice of the voiceless. We will not be silenced," the crowd roared, their voices.
The divided square lay beneath a bruised sky, shadows pooling in the cobblestones like spilled ink. A sharp breeze bit at Fynra's skin, the cool air laced with the metallic scent of anger and the acrid remnants of recent fires. Flickering torches cast a wavering glow over the fractured stone benches, their surfaces smoothed by years of desperate protests. The atmosphere buzzed with a tense energy, whispers of division ricocheting off crumbling walls adorned with graffiti that spoke to the pain of the oppressed. Here at dusk, the square thrummed with urgency, ready to either ignite or implode as the weight of its history pressed down like a heavy shroud. Fynra stepped onto the rickety stage, her heart racing with each step, echoing the rhythmic thumping of feet against stone. Standing before the crowd, she projected her voice, cutting through the murmur as it beckoned attention like a flame draws moths. The vague taste of smoke lingered on her tongue, a haunting reminder of the fires that had burned too close. Though nerves twisted in her stomach, she drew strength from the cool air, calling out, We have a chance, right?" Her words trembled, but held a spark of hope that rippled through the anxious faces before her. Cynar Thrax loomed at the edge of the square, a spectre of menace shrouded in shadow. "Do you really believe these people can unite? Look at them. They're trapped in fear and confusion," he sneered, his voice a low growl that reverberated across the cobblestones. Fynra felt the crowd's energy dip slightly, doubt creeping in as she scanned their faces, searching for signs of resilience beneath the surface. Drawing a deep breath, Fynra lifted her chin, her resolve sharpening. "It's fear that has bound us to this life of despair." The crowd shifted, an electric anticipation coursing through them. She raised her voice, powerful as the shadows danced around her, illuminating her fierce determination. "We have suffered long enough." Murmurs of agreement surged, the heartbeat of rebellion pulsing stronger beneath the surface. As she spoke, the air thickened with anticipation, each word igniting courage in the hearts of the oppressed. Cynar's shadowy presence began to recede as her voice swelled, echoing against the stone walls like a rallying cry. The dusk wrapped around her, but within burned a relentless fire. This was more than a speech, it was a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. Fynra stepped back, breathing heavily, aware that tonight marked the beginning of something greater, a movement poised to break free, a force of change ready to sweep through the streets. As dusk settled over the divided square, the scent of roasted chestnuts mingled with the chill creeping down from the mountains. Fynra stood atop a low stone platform, her voice a beacon in the gathering shadows. The crowd, a patchwork of muted browns and greys, huddled close, some clutching bowls of hearty stew filled with lentils and root vegetables, while others leaned against the rough-hewn walls, eyes glinting with the fading light. Above them, the spire of echoes loomed, its stones whispering tales of the vanished, as if warning those who dared to speak their names. With each heartbeat, an electric charge filled the air, poised to ignite rebellion or dissolve into fear. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, anxiety palpable among the crowd, as whispers of division echoed like distant thunder. Fynra drew a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over the faces turned toward her. "We have endured too much, together we shall rise, stronger than the shadows that seek to consume us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the crackle of fire from a nearby vendor frying dough in bubbling oil, the scent mingling with the earthy aroma of stews simmering in clay pots. She paused, her pulse quickening, then continued, "The oppression we face has split us apart, but we are family. We share bread and burdens." In the shadows, Cynar stood, his expression twisted with mockery. Leaning against a stone pillar, he drummed his fingers on the hilt of a knife. What could she possibly understand about unity? He scoffed, his voice barely above a whisper, yet sharp enough to slice through the hopeful murmurs. Fynra caught sight of a mother feeding her child chunks of fermented cheese, the little one wide-eyed with innocence. "Do you truly believe we can stand against them?" Cynar's taunts aimed to sow doubt, but the warmth of shared meals and whispered prayers stirred courage within her. "God's willing, we will not falter," Fynra shouted, her voice slicing through the gathering gloom. The crowd echoed her fervor, hands clenched into fists. She witnessed a small boy clutching a shard of the spire, a good luck charm passed down from his elders, his wide eyes filled with belief. Such symbols of hope were sacred, yet Cynar's presence cast a long shadow.
Our ancestors watch. They will guide us if we stand united. The crowd swayed, a living entity of defiance, resilient and vibrant in a harsh landscape. As the last rays of sunlight vanished, Fynra scanned the vendor's stall where the aroma of roasted meat mingled with earthy herbs. Doubt flickered in her mind, but she quelled it. The people around her weren't just listeners, they were the lifeblood of change. Fynra's voice rang out once more. Let us not go quietly into the night. We are